listening to Serf City on CFMH 107.3 FM.
Good evening, I'm Mark Legere, and you're listening to Serf City on CFMH 107.3 FM. Now, 4 years ago, I took my first trip to Europe when I visited Prague and Budapest. Now, both culturally rich cities, I certainly didn't lack things to do. The museums, art galleries, classical music concerts, the street life, and the pubs. Of course, the pubs. And one day we were walking down a side street and saw a poster for an upcoming Kraftwerk show. Now, I've admitted many times on this show to not knowing much about the world of music, and this is an understatement. But I had heard of Kraftwerk, the electronic music pioneers of the 80s. We should go, I told Janet. I think it's kind of a big deal that they're playing here. But the tickets were $90 and their touring schedule was pretty packed. And I sent an email to one of my musical advisors back home, Judd Crandall, now program manager at the station here. It's expensive, and we got a lot on the go already, I told Judd. What do you think we should do? Now, I don't remember the note he sent back exactly, but I remember it had a lot of exclamation points with a message along the lines of course you should go, you idiot. Now, the idiot part was an embellishment on my part. Now, Judd's too much of a gentleman to speak to people like that, but you get my point. So we went, and it was an awesome show, and more importantly, it gave me bragging rights back home, especially with people like Judd and Gary Flanagan, one of the guests on tonight's show. A local synth musician, Gary is performing tomorrow at Colonel Tucker's Pub as part of CFMH's Friday Slack Sabbath series, which will be broadcast live beginning at 4 p.m. And on tonight's show, we'll also hear from Dave Giro, who has a stay-at-home dads club here in the city. The interview is a rebroadcast of a conversation we had with Dave on the September 11th show. But first up, we're going to talk with Gary Flanagan, but we're going to kick it off with a tune from Kraftwerk and then one from Gary. And but first, Titanium from Kraftwerk. And that was Kraftwerk with Titanium, and now we're going to play you part of a tune from Gary's new album, Damariscotta, before we chat with Gary, and that song is called Future Pop.
Lonely
And that was Gary Flanagan with Future Pop. And Gary joins us now in the studio. Good evening, Gary.
Good evening. How are you?
Good. Nice of you to join us.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, and Gary and I are going to make sure that we pick up our energy as much as we can here tonight, because we both actually been in classrooms all day. Me at St. Thomas and Fredericton,
Yes.
dealing with first years, and you were out at Rossay High today?
High, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
I never know one day to the next where I'll be, but that kind of makes it interesting.
Yeah. So by trade, you're both a teacher and a musician.
Yes. I've been doing music now. I've been recording music for many, many years. I just started releasing my music probably about 8 or 9 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, synth pop.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, I guess you grew up in Quispamsis?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right, yes.
What got you into synth pop?
I think the timing was right. I grew up in the 80s, and of course, back in the 80s, you could turn on your radio at any time, and it was just sort of a tidal wave of synthesizer-based music. There were so many bands at that time doing that style, like the Eurythmics and Human League and Gary Newman. The list goes on. And I think the timing was just right. I was just at that age when I was just starting to get into music, and I was so impressed and influenced by this style of music. I just loved it from the first time I heard it.
Right.
Yeah.
And what about electronic music? What is it that you like about this?
Well, I think it has a lot to do with, ever since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated with science fiction. I grew up on Star Wars, always being a big Star Wars fan. I grew up on the first wave of video games, the Ataris, and just hearing those electronic sounds from a very early age. And hearing this sort of synthesizer-based music, it always had this sort of futuristic quality to it that always fascinated me. And I think that's probably a big reason why I kind of always gravitated towards synthesizers. I think they're a really cool instrument.
You can't get that sound out of an acoustic guitar?
Well, the technology is getting there, but I think for me anyway, I think the synth is... it's a very expressive instrument. It's a very moody instrument. You can really create very interesting atmospheres with a synthesizer.
Now, you've been very prolific from lately. I mean, you've just released 2 albums. You've got Damariscotta, which we just played a tune from, and then another one called Europe?
Europe, yes.
So tell us about why these 2 albums, and what are the differences between the 2 in terms of the sound?
Well, I'm glad you asked that. Quite some time ago, I thought, wouldn't it be interesting? I've been wanting to do a new album, and I thought, wouldn't it be interesting to do sort of 2 albums, and have one sort of be comedy, and have the other one be sort of along the lines of tragedy. Have one be very sort of upbeat, happy, fun, and the other one be very dark and moody and almost kind of sinister. So that's what I did. Damariscotta is very 80s pop, very breezy, light, upbeat. Europe is much more darker, experimental, weird, so to speak. So that's why I decided to do the 2.
And is it just the sound itself, or lyrically, do they also differ in that tone?
Yes, lyrically as well. They differ quite a bit. I've always been really interested in contradictions and contrasts, and I just thought it would be a really fun thing to do 2 albums that would really contradict each other so much. And even the mood, I record my stuff in my home studio. And it's funny because even the lighter, happier stuff, I tended to do that with the lights on in my studio. And when I did the more darker stuff, it was more by candlelight with subdued lighting, and I really got myself into it.
To get yourself into that mood, that
Exactly.
space. The tune that we played, Future Pop, where did that tune come from? Just to talk a little bit about the origin of some of the songs.
Well, I think that, again, that's kind of going back to being a kid and always sort of loving this style of music and really loving the futuristic quality about it. And I've heard people describe the music by my favorite bands, such as the Human League or Depeche Mode. I've often heard it described as being future pop, because it's sort of pop music that has that kind of science fiction, futuristic quality to it. And I love those 2 elements a lot. It really fascinates me.
Where is the market for your music? Where do you sell your records?
Well, it's funny you should ask, because I find that, well, it goes without question that this style of music has its roots sort of in Europe. It kind of started in Germany with Kraftwerk and bands like that, gradually spread to England. So I guess a lot of the bands that really have influenced me, and a lot of bands that I'm very obsessive about, are from Europe. A lot of people have even told me that when I sing with a British accent, and that doesn't surprise me at all, because I've listened to so many British new wave bands over the years. I'm not surprised at all that I've sort of soaked that up.
So who, in terms of the people who are buying your stuff, like how much in St. John versus what you're selling elsewhere?
Well, I must say that it's funny, because it's no secret that the type of music I do is very sort of out of step with kind of what's going on in St. John and the Maritimes in general, and that's okay by me. But I must say that the people in St. John who support my music, it's a small crowd, but it's a very loyal crowd. And there's people who've been there from day one, ever since I started putting out music, who've really supported me. And I just can't thank these people enough. I really appreciate that support so much. But in terms of selling music, I would say that there has been consistently a lot of sales from some very specific places, and most of those being countries like Germany and Sweden and England seem to be the ones that are the most interested. Yes.
And where in St. John, where can people buy these two new recordings?
Well, I'm hoping to, I haven't made it there yet, but I'm hoping to get some copies into Backstreet Records and various other outlets like that. I've been meaning to do that. Things have been a little bit hectic over the past couple of weeks. I have a to-do list as long as my arm, but there are a few various places locally that I'm hoping to get it out there. Yeah.
And they're fresh productions, so you just completed them recently?
Yeah, I just finished recording them not even 2 weeks ago, so it's hot off the presses.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And so tomorrow you're going to be playing at Colonel Tucker's?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm really looking forward to that. I kind of took a break from shows. I stopped doing shows about 2 years ago for a variety of reasons. I was having health issues, and just I wasn't feeling very well there for a while. And recently I've been feeling more recharged and more rested, and I did a show in Moncton last week, and that went very well. It was just a ball. So I'm really looking forward to the show tomorrow at Colonel Tucker's.
Yeah. Now, we were just before we came on the air, we were sort of kidding around in the hall talking about the Kraftwerk shows, and you asked me, was it the real band, or was it these almost like robots that they have playing on stage, and in fact it was both. They just didn't send the robots out. But they have these sort of spectacular, kind of light shows and videos running in the background, and they have the robots. And what is there something distinctive about your shows? How do your shows look and sound?
Well, I wish I had the budget that Kraftwerk has. I'd love to have robots sort of dancing in the background at my show. I think that would be a real trip.
I think the producers here would probably volunteer to be in the background pretending to be robots.
That's a good idea. I may offer them to do that. But yeah, I basically when I do a show, I have a background in theater. I acted in a lot of local amateur productions for many years. So when I get on stage, I tend to be very animated and silly and theatrical, and definitely that sort of theater background comes through when I get on stage. And to me, it's all about letting go and just having fun. And if I see people in the audience laughing and smiling and dancing, then I know I've done my job.
And so it'll be tomorrow afternoon at 4.
Yes.
At Colonel Tucker's here on campus.
That's right.
And
yes.
It's the part of the Slack Sabbath Friday series that's taking place here on campus, and it'll be also broadcast live on CFMH as well.
I'm very excited about that.
And for people who don't get out to the store for your albums, can they get your discs through your website or something?
Yes, I do have PayPal links on my website and on my MySpace page, and pretty soon I'm hoping to have both CDs available through cdbaby.com.
Okay.
So, yes.
And your website is, what is the address?
It's Gary Flanagan website, all one word, Gary Flanagan website .tripod.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And a search under an engine too would also probably come up with your
Sure.
site and also MySpace.
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Gary, for coming
Thank
in.
you
It was a
very
great
much.
chat.
It's my pleasure. Thank
And
you.
hopefully we'll see you tomorrow, or we'll hear you tomorrow. If we're
Yes.
not here, we'll tune in on the radio.
Yes, thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot.
Take care.
Okay. And that was Gary Flanagan, and like we say, he's going to be performing here on campus tomorrow at 4 o'clock in Colonel Tucker's Lounge. And if you can't make it out to campus here, do tune in at 4 o'clock for that show. And it's part of the Slack Sabbath Friday series being put on by CFMH live shows at Colonel Tucker's on Friday afternoons. And we are going to, heading into the interview that we conducted with Dave Giro about the Stay-at-Home Dads Club that actually takes place out at Indigo Books, the Starbucks at out on the east side. We thought we'd play one of a fitting tune by Gary from his new album, and the tune is called Real Men. And that was Gary Flanagan with Future Pop from Damariscotta. And I think by the end of the show, I'm actually going to pronounce the name of that album right. I'm working my way towards a good pronunciation. And Gary is going to be performing tomorrow as we said before, at Colonel Tucker's here at the university, and it will be broadcast live on CFMH at 4 o'clock. And you are listening now to Serf City on CFMH 107.3 FM, and I'm Mark Legere. And just as a reminder too, that tune that we just played was called Real Men, not Future Pop.